was perusing the web and I found this piece by Eric E. Hall, who is the assistant professor of theology over at Carroll College. And it's over on the Independent Record. The title of the piece is Gimme That Old-Time Atheism. And whenever I read something like that, I always kind of cringe because people, I find, seem to have a kind of a strange, nostalgic idea about how atheism was in the past. But in reality, people have been doubting God for much the same reasons for a long time. With me here, I have Peachy Fiend from Twitter. First of all, what did you think about the article in general?
I find it a little ignorant and contradictory. A lot of the time in this article, he's going to be, talking about things he doesn't seem to really understand. It doesn't seem like he really has a full understanding of what atheism is. It doesn't seem like he really understands science. It doesn't sound like he understands how it works. It doesn't seem like he has any kind of, faith in it, I guess. In my opinion, this article is pretty much just laughable, and that's the best adjective I have for it. I'm actually quite surprised that you say he has a college education. I'm concerned for what qualifies as a college education.
Yeah, I mean, this is the kind of stuff that you get on Facebook or Twitter, right?
It's like really bad. It's like it doesn't even have any kind of structure at all. Like he'll make a sentence that doesn't, it's not even like a sentence.
Yeah, I found that. I was totally confused. Even with the first paragraph, let me just get this one out here. Most contemporary atheists get it wrong. Today's atheism tends to stand on an absolutely self-contradictory claim. Only that which can be seen can be known. It's a pseudo-scientific claim.
I like how he adds that in there.
The application of this sentiment to a God is simple. Because God can't be seen, God can't be known. The problem with this statement is simple. So, first of all, I'm no expert, but I have a feeling that might be a bit of a misrepresentation of what your average atheist out there, your average modern-day atheist believes or thinks.
Right, and actually right off the bat, I have to say that, it isn't a claim. Atheism is not a claim. For him to even think that it is a claim, he hasn't really looked into this very much. Any atheist will tell you that it's not a claim. It is a rejection to a claim. So for him to call it a claim right off the bat in the first sentence makes me, totally facepalm.
But this is something that I see all the time. Even the discussions I had the first few episodes of this podcast, I was discussing with a Baptist about this, and he immediately shifted the burden of proof towards me. He said, oh, well, I have a responsibility to prove God exists, but you have a responsibility too to prove that God doesn't exist. I don't know how you're supposed to do that.
Well, you can't prove a negative, so that's kind of just it's not a correct thing to say because it's not accurate.
This idea that atheism is a belief system even is kind of unusual.
Right.
It really sets up the tone for the rest of the entire article.
It does. We're only talking about the first sentence so far. That's just the first sentence.
So later on, he goes in and he says, anytime we say that a concept can or can't be known, we ought to be able to apply the criterion given to itself. I don't even know what that means.
I don't know what it means either. I was trying to figure that out, actually. And that's kind of what I meant by saying, he makes a sentence and it's not really a sentence. It's like that. What is that supposed to mean? And there's actually a lot of sentences in here like that I was just like, what? What does that mean?
One thing that I found when they say a concept can or can't be known, I really wonder what they mean. Do they mean...
right.
They obviously don't mean demonstrated via evidence.
Yeah, clearly. Because there isn't any.
So he says, if we say that all things knowable must be visible, then so should that statement be visible.
That makes no sense, though. How can a statement be visible? You're not going to speak, and the words are just going to be like bubbles that come out of your mouth. You know what I mean? What is he talking about?
If you've got someone who believes that the entire universe was brought into being by some guy saying something, so like a magic words or something, maybe that's what this is. Like, so anytime we say that a concept can or can't be known, we ought to be able to apply the criterion given to itself. If we say that all things knowable must be visible, then so should that statement be visible. I don't know. I would just take out a magic marker and cross that entire thing out.
Yeah, I really am not sure what he means by that.
And then the next one is, unfortunately, you can't see that criterion statement. It can't be empirically verified or falsified, to use a couple of philosophical terms.
See, and actually, I've had somebody say something similar to this. Actually, yesterday, I think it was Jake S. Tweets or something like that. He was telling me that science can't be true because there is no science to prove science. And I just thought that was like the dumbest thing I ever heard in my entire life. And that's kind of what I think of when I read this sentence. It can't be empirically verified or falsified, or to use a couple of philosophical terms, is what he says. But yeah, I don't think he really understands the concept at all.
I mean, I don't want to trash all over necessarily, but he's supposedly the assistant professor of theology at Carroll College.
That's insane to me.
I don't know where Carroll College is. Maybe it's a theological seminary or something. In other words, it's a criterion used to decide what's true and what's not true that cannot vouch for itself. So he uses this word criterion.
Yeah, he likes that word. I've noticed that he really likes that word. I think he's said it like at least 7 times in the last 2 sentences.
So criterion, what is that? Okay, we ought to be able to apply the criterion given to us. Is that a test? Does he mean a test? In other words, it's a test used to decide what's true and what's not true that cannot vouch for himself. Oh, maybe he means that science is not a good test because of that.
I think that he's right. He's saying, I think that he doesn't believe that science is going to give us everything. You know, he thinks there's like a spiritual side to it that we aren't going to be able to figure out without God or without religion. And I think that that's wrong.
You see what's so tricky about these articles is that they never really, I always get the feeling that they're not really sharing what they really mean.
Yeah.
Because of that, the silly criterion ought to be thrown out, and with it, most contemporary forms of atheism. That's a pretty bold statement.
Right. Like, what contemporary forms of atheism are we talking about? He doesn't even mention one of them. He
doesn't even mention a single atheist. Usually they pull out Richard Dawkins or someone, and they say they treat him like the king of the atheists, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Exactly.
I don't see any. So, yeah.
Yeah, he's not giving any examples. He's not proving anything he says. You know, there's not anything in here that would make me think that this sentence is, valid or, verifiable. There's nothing in his article that has any facts. He doesn't have any quotes, any, anything. Anything. Any kind of reference whatsoever.
Yeah, which is tricky when you're trying to knock down a pseudoscientific claim, right? When you're going against that.
Right.
Okay, he gets frank on us. He says, I make this statement because, frankly, we all deserve the more intellectually rigorous and existentially pressing versions of atheism than the pedantic and anti-intellectual versions going around today.
He claims atheism is fake, but that it's real, and he wants the real thing. So that really confused me because I'm like, wait, he's saying, atheism is this thing that, it can't be proven itself, and all this stuff. And but then he's also saying, oh, but it's real, and I want the real thing, and it's intellectual. But he's like also saying the exact contradictory thing. Like, it just, he's not consistent with what he's saying here, like, at all. As like with the last two paragraphs, it's just like, this does not correlate to anything he said so far.
I mean, I wrote a blog post about this in the past, where there seems to be a lot of Christian apologetics who really love a certain brand of atheist back in the 20th century. These would be the existentialists, the Albert Camus or the Sartre. I think it's often because these folks, some of these more existential atheists back in the day, were really kind of unhappy people, it seems, a lot of the time. Nietzsche, as far as I could tell, had a few problems. So, I mean, so they go back to this, and I think that they really dig the idea that some of these atheists either said that they sort of wished that they could believe in a God, or that they said that, everything's just empty void without God. There is no God. It's so sad and depressing. They really feed on that. That's what I got, at least in the past, reading some other apologetics. I wonder if there might be a little bit of that here.
Yeah. And it looks like, he does continue on a little bit with that.
Oh yeah, he actually.
This too. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's very wishy-washy about it. He doesn't seem to really have a side. And I don't know if he wrote it like that intentionally, just because he didn't want it to be, sound biased, even though it does anyway. But yeah, as he goes on, like, the pseudo-intellectual idea that sciences have answers to all our questions, like, yes, science can answer our questions. Yes, innovation can keep us out of suffering, and we can use innovation to move forward and to end some suffering. We're all about that. And for him to think that this idea of innovation and science and, learning these new things is just going to, lead to more suffering, I just don't understand why he thinks that, because I think that it's actually a way to move forward. I think that, innovation and science are what are going to answer these questions for us, not some kind of spirituality, which has no evidence, no, factual thing that we can actually test like science does, So that was just my thought on it.
I totally agree. I mean, I think that the human beings, actually, as a race, as a life form, has been on this planet trying to make things better with science and, well, maybe not. Yeah, we'll say science. I mean, even
medicine,
banging rocks together. I mean, or making fire. I mean, it's trial and error, right?
Grass growing is science,
Yeah,
it's all science, So I mean, there's so many things that we've already solved with science. There's so many, medications we've come out with, cures we've come out with because of science. It's not, without those innovations, without that science moving forward, I mean, there'd be still so much suffering. For him to say that we could progress our way out of suffering with innovations in science is pseudo-intellectual idea. It's just like, that's just ignorant. I mean, it really is.
I think that to say these versions didn't hide under the pseudo-intellectual idea that the sciences have answers to all of our questions. The sciences,
right.
You don't even need to say that. The sciences don't have answers to all of our questions, but they're working on that. I mean...
Right. I mean, eventually maybe they'll have all our questions, but not now. I do believe that science can answer those questions eventually, I don't think that him blanket statementing it, I guess, it's just like really generalized for him to say all our answers to all of our questions. If it doesn't answer all of our questions right now, it doesn't mean that it's false. It just means that we haven't gotten that far. And so for him to think, that we should know it all right now, and if, science hasn't figured it all right now, then maybe it just isn't right. Well, that's just impatient, So...
Yeah, and actually some questions might not even have answers. I mean, some of the
Right.
you also have to check the quality of your questions, like to say why, for instance. What does that mean? I mean, that could either mean how. I mean, it could mean
Right.
how. How has an answer, but why may not have an answer. There may not be an answer there. I just think that back when I was religious, and I used to sort of read stuff like this every once in a while, and it was really meant to try and I guess try to knock the legs out from underneath science, because I really didn't have any legs to stand on myself.
And I can say the same for myself as well. When I was growing up Catholic, um, a lot of the time I would, if your faith is wavering and you have questions, you're questioning things, you're going to go to the internet. You're going to look up this stuff. You're going to try and find ways to, soothe yourself and make yourself feel like, okay, everything's fine. He is still there. Like, he is still real. And that would comfort me as, when I was a Catholic. But, of course, with my questions and all these answers I'm not getting from, what I thought was supposed to be the answer, I was like, well, if this is the answer, then how come I don't have any? How come I don't have any answers? So I started looking more into articles like these, and a lot of the stuff that I was reading, after reading a few of them, it just started to sound very cliche to me, and I just couldn't take it seriously anymore. And my parents, sent me to religious camps and stuff like that to help me, bring me closer to God and stuff like that. But it just never stuck with me. I always had questions. And so sites like these, I'm sure there's Christians going to the site right now and saying, oh, okay, this guy thinks that, it's still possible. He's a theologist, and he teaches at a college and, whatever. And
He's a
so
smart
they're
young
thinking,
man.
oh, right. And so they're like, oh, well, he must know. He's smart. And they just trust it because they need to. If they don't trust it, then they feel like they're losing their faith. You know what I mean?
A lot of this stuff is wrapped up in lingo too. I remember when I was reading some philosophy back when I left Catholicism, and I was sort of a pagan at the time, reading this sort of stuff, and a lot of the language is very technical, and I used to wonder, why is this language so technical? I mean, some of it, I guess, could be technical for a reason, but sometimes when I read some of this stuff, I honestly wonder if people are kind of hiding behind words.
Yeah. And you know what? A lot of them are too. I've noticed a lot of people who interact with me on Twitter will, try to take it another way, or try to distract me from what I'm, really trying to talk about. And they just, they want to take it and make it a totally different conversation than I'm trying to, make it.
So they simply adhered to a bare and unsentimental world, a world they saw through the atrocities of war and tyranny. These atheistic thinkers have, as such, been invaluable to me as I think through the depth of human despair, and I could not be the religious person that I am without them. I think this kind of speaks to what I was talking about earlier, where I find a lot of Christian apologists really, really like sad, empty atheists.
They like making it. Yep, they like to make it sound like we're just like the saddest, most emo people ever, and our lives are like so horrible, and why would anybody want to be like us? But I mean, I'm fine. I don't feel like I'm like that at all. I'm, realistic. I have a loving boyfriend who loves me. I have a happy home. I have a happy life. I'm doing what I love, and I'm atheist.
Yeah.
So I don't understand why I'm proof that that's not true.
I think when it comes down to brass tacks, everybody has a list of things that they value or cherish the most. And unless you're really totally screwed up by religion, in my opinion, your list will look a whole lot like my list. So if you're a theist or whatever, you hopefully put your kids above your religion, or so you're
I
not
hope.
dragging them up to a mountain and having them killed because you hear a voice, right? I mean,
Right.
your priorities are the same, hopefully.
Yep, and there's a lot of religions that do that too with the faith healing and end up killing their kids. And there's one family I read about that they've killed up to like 3 kids or something like that before they even got any kind of legal action because it's their religion and they use their religion as a loophole, saying like, oh, but this is what we believe. And I don't know how that equates to, oh, it's okay, you can kill your kid then. But I don't know. That's just me.
Well, people often put on kid gloves when they deal with religion. I'm not really sure why. I have no idea, but I mean, I recently covered a story in Israel where they want to open up a theater, and they want the theater complex to be open on Saturdays, which are the Shabbat. And there are thousands of Orthodox Jews standing outside protesting this, and rocks were thrown. It's insane. So if you're dealing with someone or a group that goes absolutely bonkers and does crazy things over things like movies, I mean...
Right, and there was that Orthodox Jew at the LGBT fest that was like stabbing people too, again. And this is his second time doing that. He had done this a few years before and had jail time, and he had just gotten out this year and did it again. So this was his actually the second time that he's done this. And it's weird because I didn't hear about the first one, and I must not have been as into the current events as I am now, but I just thought that was horrible. I hate people who are just, people are out there trying to have a good time and enjoy the Pride Fest, and then there's just people like that who come out and just destroy the whole thing for their own, like, selfish purposes,
Yeah, and it's a lot easier for the people in charge, let's say, to placate the crazies than it is to to go up against these things.
Right.
So he says, I think, in fact, that these forms of atheism are so powerful because they're grounded in the same questions that religiosity are grounded in. They're helpful to religious traditions because the atheist is of this bent doesn't settle for certain pre-made answers to questions of suffering, but asks for authenticity, demands honesty in any answer given. Such atheists are committed to their response too. Okay, so...
Yeah, for that, I'm not really understanding that first sentence. He says atheism is powerful because it's grounded on the same questions that religiosity is grounded in, but that's not like... It's just confusing to me because I don't understand whether, in this last sentence he's saying like, oh, these atheistic thinkers have been invaluable to me when I think of human despair and all this like sad crap. And then he's like, oh, but atheism is powerful. And it's like, what? Wait, what? What do you believe? Like, I don't understand.
Well, he's only into these sad atheists. So he's saying that he thinks these sad atheists are really into something powerful because I guess they're trying to answer question. Well, okay, because they're a lot of these atheists, I think these existentialists were really kind of dwelling on questions about whether God exists or not, and also these atheists, some of them, as far as I know, we sort of announced to the world that life is a sort of a meaningless quagmire if you don't do the religion thing. I can see where he would find these things good because they really play into his own what his own preconceived notion.
Yeah, I just think that what he's writing here is, I don't think he even really knows. He doesn't seem to be consistent.
Yeah, there's questions about, well, for instance, pre-made answers. I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
What does he even mean by that? Does he mean that atheists we go by pre-made answers? I mean, if the pre-made answer is I don't believe in something for which there is insufficient evidence, then I guess so, right? I mean, but doesn't that apply to pretty much everything?
Yeah, I mean, I think that when he says, yeah, doesn't settle for certain pre-made answers to questions of suffering, but asks for authenticity and demands honesty in every answer given. But I mean, that's true. That is true. We do want answers that are honest. We do want answers that are authentic, and we do want them to prove what they're claiming. But I don't see how. I'm not understanding why he's connecting this to us having. I mean, because he says they're helpful to religious traditions because the atheist of this bent doesn't settle for pre-made answers to questions of suffering. So, but what does that have to do with the authenticity or the honesty of it?
Does he think
Like,
that maybe we're
is he saying like our answers are like, do we have like a notebook where we just go, oh, he asked this question, oh, it says to say this, like, and then like to say, oh, is it authentic, is it honesty, but like how is he comparing anything right now? He's not.
I think that maybe for authenticity rather and honesty, I think that maybe he might be thinking that us atheists are somehow lying to ourselves or maybe deluding ourselves. I mean, if we're not miserable all the time about our disbelief in a God, then maybe we're just not being honest with ourselves, and we should be more honest with ourselves and realize just how empty and meaningless our existences are. That's the only thing I can get. If you just, I think if
Yeah,
you keep comparing it to
I
sort of a
I hear that
template.
from a lot of people. I hear it from like tons of people all the time. Oh, well, where's your God-shaped hole? What are you going to fill it with? And I'm just like, seriously? What am I going to fill my God-shaped hole with? How
Bennett,
about logic?
how,
How about some reason?
or if that doesn't work, then I'll take Ben and Jerry's Cherry Garcia.
Yeah, throw that in too.
Um, so here we have there's an understandable, defiant, and even moral rejection of God's possibility in the unsettling response to suffering that were there.
Okay, this I actually literally like sat and was like, what?
It's very
uh,
poetic, isn't
it
it?
is, but it is. I think a lot of the stuff he's writing is he's trying to make it poetic. He wants it to be like he wants it to like touch their soul or whatever.
Here we go. So this atheist faces up to the fact that one has to make it in a cold and valueless world. There we go again, right?
Yep. Cold and valueless. So the only reason that he has value to his life is because he has an imaginary friend. I think that's pretty sad. I think that's what's really sad and cold.
What about his hobbies or his kids or I don't know, anything
Right.
at all?
Does he like anything other than that?
He
Like,
paints a picture of a world like 24/7 Sin City or something, you know? It's like, oh, there's
right.
nothing. It's just void.
Everything is horrible, but I have Jesus. It's okay.
Yeah, and I never really got it. Even when I was growing up, I didn't quite like I was always rather befuddled by the Catholic rituals, and also there was also a fair bit of coldness even there as well. I mean, I don't, for me there
Yeah,
was
for
nothing
sure.
in the rituals that was exciting at all. It was get me out of church. Yeah.
Right. I hated church. Oh, I used to try and skip catechism all the time, and my parents would catch me. One time I walked over to like a one of the cafes near the church after my mom dropped me off, and she caught me there. She was really mad. So like every day, when she would drop me off to catechism, she would make me walk up with her, and she would walk me to my class, and then like pass me off to my teacher, and be like, "All right, she's here," because she knew I wouldn't go.
The worst for me was always confession, because I'd have to make up extra sins, right? Because the normal number of sins wasn't good enough for the priest, and
Yeah.
also I had a couple of priests actually who were had an unhealthy fascination with how many times I touched myself and where, which was kind of gross.
Yeah, actually, I dated a Mormon back in the day. I know,
Wow.
you don't need to say anything. Yeah, and they had to like tell their priests like everything they did like all the time, and it was really creepy. Like he had to like tell his priest like when he had dirty thoughts and stuff like that. And I just always thought that was like really weird.
Did the priest ask for details?
Yeah, yeah, they would want to know like everything.
Oh,
And
okay.
one of his friends got caught making out with a girl before he was married or whatever, and they like wouldn't let him go on his mission for like another 2 years because he like sinned or whatever.
Wow.
Uh-huh.
Oh, okay. So let's see. So he's basically, he's still dumping all over. He's saying that atheism, no meaning, void, life is horrible, or at least without any
Yeah.
kind of meaning whatsoever. Uh,
Also, like I like how he says atheistic thinkers have been useless to me. It's like, well, no shit. You've been indoctrinated from birth. You have a biased opinion. You don't you obviously do not have any use in us. But then the thing that gets me too is that he says, atheistic thinkers are useless to me, but then at the top he's like saying that they're useful and that they're powerful because of I don't know. It's just stupid.
we got
He's just contradicting himself over and over and over. It's just priceless.
we got so he brings in Buddhism, and I actually used to meditate at a Buddhist temple around the block from my place. It was Tibetan Buddha. I would just ignore all the prayers and junk and just do the meditation thing. It was pretty good. He brings this in. He says the Buddha was interested in the question of suffering. And he says, unlike the atheist, the Buddhist remains absolutely silent on the question of God.
Ooh. Like he's saying like, oh, we're just so like loud and obnoxious and militant about our beliefs that we don't have.
But if you ask, okay, there are not all Buddhists are atheists, but there are a fair number of Buddhists that are atheists, and I mean
Right.
I mean, great, they're being silent. What what does that mean? Does it mean that the old time atheists were better because they didn't talk about God as much? They
I think he's like referring to new atheism. I think he means like, old atheists were like silent about their beliefs and now they're like, no, like this isn't gonna fly. So I think that maybe he's saying like now atheists are obnoxious because they want to tell us how to feel about whatever. But I don't think that that's really true. We're just giving them facts. If they can't handle facts and if facts are going to deter their, faith or whatever, maybe it's kind of a pussy faith.
I don't know. Like I've read some of the older atheists out there. I don't necessarily think that the new atheists are more strident necessarily. Okay, other than maybe Richard Dawkins and some of these others, people like just general everyday people. I really think it has something to do with the internet. I run into books in the past, even perusing like Gutenberg or Project Gutenberg or some of these other things, and some
Yeah.
of these atheists were strident in their writing, but they were writing books, and the books probably got published by little free thought groups here and there. There wasn't much spread to that. But with the internet, or even with the bulletin board systems, that just busted wide open. So you got,
Right.
you know,
Right. I get what you're saying, yeah. And I think that is a lot to do with it too. I think that old atheists, let's say, let's call them, I think that they just like didn't have the means to be as loud and as, um, criticizing as they do now, They
look at,
don't have that big web space to just spread it on and share it.
I mean, yeah, exactly. If the editor doesn't want to publish your article in the newspaper, and also if you can't maintain anonymity, because with me, with my blog for the first year, I was this guy Godless Poutine, right? And I wasn't using my real name. And so back in just imagine, put yourself back 40 years. There's no internet. You got to kind of stick your neck out. I mean, unless you're like some stuffy academic in a philosophy department somewhere where everyone thinks you're a godless heathen anyway. If you're just a regular Joe, you're not going to stick your neck out and say you're an atheist. And if you can't have any kind of anonymity like you can on the web, I mean, you're not going to do that.
Right. And I know a lot of people, that I talk to on my page that say, oh, I'm an atheist, but I live in an area where, if people knew that I would get killed or worse. And it's just like, wow, like those people are actually really brave, to be on the internet and promoting atheism like that in a place where technically it's really not safe for them to do that.
Yeah, it baffles my mind. I like some of these Bangladeshi bloggers or even bloggers or in Egypt. I ended up doing a Snapchat or something with someone who turned out to be an atheist living in Egypt. It's crazy there. I would not have the cojones to do that.
Yeah, I have a friend in Egypt as well, and he'll like send me all his local newspaper things too sometimes that I'll post. But yeah, it's not going well there. I believe that like beef was just like illegalized or something, which is kind of ridiculous.
Do you mean beef or pork?
No, I think like beef. He sent me some like article on it, and I was
Really?
like, "What, beef? Really?" I don't know where that was, but I think he lives in Egypt though, so I assume it has to be somewhere around him.
Because Islam, I think they have a problem with pork, unless you're talking about...
Yeah, this was beef. That's why I was like, why beef?
Yeah, that's really strange. I don't know. Maybe it's more of a Hindu type. And then he says, when we get over ourselves, we'll no longer experience suffering in the same manner, which rests on a false ideal that things are supposed to be different than they are. The Buddhist response is indeed powerful. Okay, so tell this to the people in, I don't know, war-torn Syria or something.
He doesn't even put there. He's like, Buddha's response is indeed powerful. Where's the response? I don't see it anywhere.
Where's the response? But also, I mean, he's saying when we get over ourselves. So I think that...
He thinks that this is like egotistical or something.
Yeah, us atheists should just get over
We're just
ourselves.
Rebels.
I mean...
We're just living on the edge.
When the next
That's what
time...
he thinks.
The next time you go to the children's hospital and you see some kid dying of leukemia, you should just say, hey, man, just get over yourself already. It's not a problem.
Right? Oh, my gosh. Yeah, then they'll just suffer in a different manner. It'll be fine.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Just like he says.
We're not...
We'll no longer be suffering in the same manner, so it should be all right.
Yeah, we're not talking about someone whose Wi-Fi's gone out or something. We're talking about actual for real suffering, right? And so... Right. I this seems to be a bit of a triviality here. Yeah.
Especially since he doesn't put Buddha's response. That was indeed powerful. How are we supposed to know it was powerful if we don't even...
You kind of broke up there, so I didn't quite catch that.
Well, just like at the end, he's like writing like the Buddha's response is indeed powerful. But like we don't have any way of knowing that it's powerful. He didn't even like say what it was.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, a quote would be kind of good, even if it's just a little one-liner, a little zinger.
Right. If he's like trying to prove this to us, like prove it to us,
But that's often what I find with a lot of these articles is they'll go into these very general ideas, but really all I'm looking for is some proof. Could you stop wasting our time and just give us some proof? Proof is the wrong word. Evidence, because I guess you can't really prove anything fully, but evidence works.
Right.
Okay, so he's saying that basically with Buddhism, everybody just sucks it up, gets over themselves, their egos, and realizes that things aren't going to change, right?
Right. They take turns kicking each other in the balls and getting over it.
and then with Judeo-Christian response, they're talking about how things are supposed to be different, and they should have been different, and they'll be different again. Apparently, suffering was never welcome in the world, and this, I mean, this just brings up even more questions for me. If God is so infallible and so knowing of the future, then why did it work out this way? And why does God have to send his son, who happens to be himself, down to earth to, I guess, make things right with himself so that he can wave his fingers around and solve the problem? I don't get that. So the vision produced by the biblical text, in the biblical text rather, especially Genesis and the Gospels, is a vision of restoration. Okay, so this whole paragraph is meaningless to me because it's just a bunch of Bible gobbledygook.
It's all preaching. He's just preaching.
But finally, the second last paragraph, he gets to his point. So I'm gonna read this now. But here's my point. If indeed religiosity is at least partially a response to the question of suffering in this world, if this is part of the definition of religiosity, then atheism is strangely a form of religiosity itself, at least in its best form. It's that version that we have to pay attention to because it's asking the same question as any believer. So I think what he's getting at here is that
that beginning part is just like, no.
So I think what he's getting at here is that if religiosity is a response to the question of suffering in this world, I mean, maybe, I guess, some of it, then atheism is strangely a form of religiosity itself, at least in its best form. So
how? He doesn't say how.
Well, also, we're turned back to the very first paragraph here. He's saying atheism is somehow a response to the question of suffering in this world. Well, not really. I mean, atheism is just a lack of belief in any gods.
That's all it is.
How is that really an answer to the question of suffering in the world?
Yeah.
The only thing I can say is that as an atheist, I see suffering in the world, and I see various causes for that suffering.
Right, and I think that atheism itself is misunderstood. People hear it, and it's like this bad word to them. They're like, oh my gosh, that person's an atheist, did you hear? It's really not that big of a deal. But yeah, people like to attach all these other things to it, like Satanism or like stuff like this even. And it's really not like that. Like, atheism is just the absence of a belief in God. That's it. That's the only... I mean, if we want to go into other things that each individual is, that's fine. But atheism in general, you're not going anywhere with this, because that's all it means.
because you could have atheists who are secular humanists or what have you, and they've attached some other things to their atheism. Or you could have atheists who are total assholes. I mean, the spectrum is wide, right? There are plenty of...
There are definitely like atheist trolls out there, as many as there are Christian trolls, I'm sure.
The last thing here is this version of atheism can only help to clarify the terror and honesty of the question we're all already asking, even if its answer is ultimately in the wrong. Are we all asking this question? Are you asking this question all the time? I don't know if I'm asking this question.
Can only clarify the terror and honesty of the question we're already asking. What's the question? What's the question we're asking?
I think the question, maybe it's the problem of evil and suffering that he's getting at here. He's asking, like, why is there suffering? There could be some why there, but I think it's mostly how. I think it has something to do with human nature. It has something to do with resource distribution. Mostly human nature. I mean, again, I think that there's a lot of... it has a lot to do with a lot of assholes out there. Really, I think things could be a whole lot better. I think
that he probably had a debate with someone, and it inspired writing this, because I don't... it seems like he just is in anger writing this. None of it is really sufficient. It's just like, oh, atheists are so sad. Oh, but they're great, but only because of religion. And he's contradicting himself, and it's just... I just don't believe a word he says.
So, with that said, I like to point out that if Eric E. Hall hears this transmission, There's nothing. I got nothing personal against Mr. Hall. If he'd like to come on the podcast, he's totally welcome.
I don't know. I was trying to see if he had like a Twitter, but I couldn't find one. So I wanted to let him know to actually check it out because I was actually curious about his response.
There were a lot of comments here too. There's 19 comments, and most of them sound a little bit like what we were talking about.
I would love to hear what he has to say about our comments.
Peachy Fiend, thanks a lot for coming to the podcast. I hope you can come back maybe later on. We can have another discussion.
For sure. Absolutely.
You better do it now. Better do it now. Or there ain't gonna be no after while. You better find a way. Better find a way. Don't you dare delay. Don't you dare delay. Or there ain't gonna be no after.